Janus Lim, one of the finest economists of current times, young man from Berkeley University, he wrote, and what they have done, and this is very relevant for us, they said the fallacy is by aggregating political institutions. You need to unpack the notion of political institutions. And they divided it into political economic institutions and the pure political institutions. They say growth is neutral to political institutions. Doesn't matter if you have a presidential form of government or you have a Westminster model. Doesn't matter if you have a single transferable vote or a one man, one vote. It doesn't matter whether you have a Westminster democracy or whether you have the Senate system. Those are larger political institutions. They are growth neutral. What you need is political economic institutions. The institutions who regulate, the institutions who write economic policy. They have to be transparent, they have to be stable. And it doesn't matter what political system produces this. And see how true they are. Look at China, look at India. In an autocracy such as China, you have a large global investment because their political economic institutions work. In a country where there are hardly any political freedoms, investors flock. It sounds counterintuitive to those of us who've always fought for democracy. But no, it is not. Because their political institutions are stable. Not for a moment do I trivialize or even reduce or minimize the fundamental freedoms and their value. If you talk of not gross domestic product, but gross domestic happiness and well-being, a country without the cherished freedoms would not be worth living in. There is no country which is worth living in if it doesn't guarantee you a right to life. And the right to life is not the life by way of animal existence. It must mean a life of quality, a life in which you can grow and develop as a human being. So I don't minimize the importance of the freedom, but when we talk of growth, and ultimately when we talk of prosperity, fraternity, you cannot have all this in a society racked by poverty, by disparity. Disparities are fine. They do not create social tension if the basic level is high. Take Switzerland, a country with huge disparities. They call themselves socialists. The top few Swiss earned far more than their neighbors. They didn't show it. That's the difference. And the base level is high. United States has more disparities than we do if you go by numbers. But there is no social tension because the base level is high. What creates social tension is lack of the basics. The poor man will not grudge you your yacht or your private plane if he has a decent life. What he grudges you is where he has to struggle for his piece of bread, where he has to struggle to get his child into a school, where he has to struggle for health care. These are the very basics in life. When you get up in the morning, it's not hope in your eyes with which you look forward to for the next 24 hours. It's despair of, oh my God, yet another day. That is what causes social turmoil. And there is only one answer, and that is growth. The key to political institutions, they found by empirical research, was respect, yes, surprisingly, respect for property rights. I think an autocratic system like China today guarantees property rights far more than a democracy like India. Respect for education. You cannot have innovation unless you have education. You cannot have a participatory decision-making in a country unless you have education. Low military spending. And most of all, economic freedom. In this backdrop, let us try and analyze what is the message which we get in 2012 from all these amendments. We recognize that the scenario of 2012 is not promising. Just this morning, I saw a very interesting debate on Ruchir Sharma's new book, Is India a Breakout Country? Montek Ahluwalia, who's always candid, conceded that 7%, 8% rates of growth are pies in the sky. We forget one thing, which is now accepted. 5% plus growth for India is 0% growth for the Western world. 5% may be great for a foreign investor. For the Indian, 5% is what keeps your BPL where it is. If you need to reduce BPL, you need to grow at more than 5%. So when the government says, oh yes, we have 5% rate, I think they should say it with their face hanging in shame rather than with a sense of pride. We have crossed the trillion plus mark in our GDP. We aspire to cross in the next decade the 2.5 trillion mark. We have touched 30% of GDP as investment rate. Will we be able to sustain it? And most of all, will we be able to inspire confidence for investment? Let us take some negatives which we cannot change. We cannot change our political decision-making system. We take that as granted. India is in a churn. I spoke yesterday in Dubai to chartered accountant friends, and this is what I discussed with them. I said, India is in a churn. Mrs. Gandhi created an extremely strong center and destroyed the states. Gandhiji inspired our constitution makers to make the Indian structure bottom to top. From the village, from the panchayat, to the cities, to the states, to the union. Mrs. Gandhi turned it on its head. Federalism gave way to Unitarianism. We have paid a dear price for it. We have paid a dear price for it because it was an unsustainable model. Power has gone back to the states, but they have lost all sense of responsibility. Governance of the states was from Delhi. Political changes are quick. The last decade, we have once again seen powerful states. We also last week for a counter-terrorism law, the union government halted in its tracks. For FDI, the government halted in its tracks. Every decision, this government seems, it sometimes seems ironical to say halted in its tracks because you wonder if it is at all moving. Why? Because the states have become strong. But due to this hiatus in governance, they have truly become the soft underbelly of Indian governance, the soft underbelly of Indian politics. Corruption is at its highest in the states. Yes, we have corruption in Delhi, but it is nowhere near the egregious corruption you have in the states. The quality of governance in the states is abysmal. See the kind of, and especially in the newborn states, the kind of governance we have seen, fractured verdicts, leaders who govern by buying, openly, brazenly buying votes. India is in a churn. Will this last? I don't think so. We will stabilize. You can't change this overnight. It takes decades to build institutions. It takes weeks, months to destroy them. And that is what has happened in India. You can't change that. The perception of corruption in India, you can't change. Because that requires serious structural reform. All this nonsense about a Lokpal is adding one more tier of policing without even addressing the cardinal issue as to why are we so corrupt. What is wrong with our structure that breeds corruption? How do we address the problems that create corruption? Or do we want to add one more policeman, only so that some people have the joy of the French Revolution seeing heads fly. That is not going to help the country. Yes, we need an ombudsman, but more crying need is to address why are we here. You can't change that. But what you could have changed is the perception that, well, our institutions which do work, like the union government, are investment friendly, are growth friendly, are stable. Governments may come and go. The policies of growth, the policies of economics, bar corrections which need to be made from time to time, will go on forever. Have we given that message? No, we haven't.